Good evening. This is the February 25th, 2026 meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kat Siegel, chair of the CAC. Our vice chair is Naj Daniels. I'd like to thank our clerk, Amy Sayung, and our operator, Daniela Reblay, for this meeting. Madam Clerk, please do a roll call to ensure we have quorum, and then read an announcement about public comment.
CAC members, when I call your name, please say present to ensure quorum. Member Bars?
Bars, aye.
Bars present. Vice Chair Daniels? Daniels absent. Member Ford? Ford absent. Member Imadadeen?
Imadadeen, aye.
Imadadeen present. Member Kim? Kim absent. Member Levine?
Levine present.
Levine present. Member Margarita? Margarita absent. Member Milford Rosales?
Milford Rosales present.
Milford Rosales present. Member Ortega? Ortega absent. Chair Siegel?
Siegel present.
Siegel present. Chair, we do not have quorum. We will meet in workshop mode. Also, public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you will be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item when the item is called, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 again or you will be removed from the queue. When you are asked to unmute yourself, press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise that you are allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any televisions or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll move on to item number 2. This is the chair's report. Thank you, CAC members, for joining tonight. I have just a few announcements before we jump into the agenda. First, some good news. This body has been tracking the transit fiscal cliff facing many Bay Area operators over the past several years. Earlier this month, Governor Newsom signed Assembly and Senate bills authorizing $590 million in loans to Bay Area transit agencies, providing bridge funding for AC Transit, BART, Caltrain, and SFMTA until funds could flow from a potential regional measure, and in the case of a SFMTA local transit measure, would start to flow to transit operators should they be approved by voters this coming November. The loans will be administered by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and secured by state transit assistance that flow to transit operators with repayment over 12 years. Without this support, agencies could face severe service reductions and fare increases, which would impact regional operations and San Francisco's economic recovery. At yesterday's Transportation Authority board meeting, SFMTA Director Julie Kirschbaum provided an update on SFMTA's budget outlook, including how they are looking to the regional revenue measure, a local revenue measure, and agency efficiencies and revenue generation to help close the budget gap. This is a more expanded version of the presentation that CAC received in January, and the recording is viewable on sfgovtv.org. While we work on stabilizing and enhancing transit near term, it is still important to plan for future growth in the city, including improvements to our transit system. That's why I'm excited to hear from staff on the Geary 19th subway and regional connection study later on in the agenda for this evening. The Transportation Authority-led study team will be hosting 2 virtual town hall meetings on Thursday, March 5th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. and Saturday, March 7th from 10 to 11:30 a.m. Both sessions will feature the same content. The town halls will provide an update on key study findings and next steps with language interpretation available in Cantonese and Spanish. Visit the project website to register for the virtual town halls and learn more at sfcta.org/projects. Geary 19th. The Executive Director's report presented at the February board meeting also highlights 3 sales tax funded projects that are now substantially complete, so San Franciscans and visitors can experience the improvements, including Vision Zero left turn calming, traffic calming, focusing on the Tenderloin, Lake Merced Quick Build, focusing on the section from John Muir Drive to Skyline Boulevard, and Next Generation Sanchez Slow Street Project, 23rd to 30th Streets. Meeting management notes, CAC members, staff, and public commenters in the room, please be sure to speak directly into the microphone so folks attending virtually can hear you. Please try to limit your questions to a max of 2 questions per agenda item. Please turn off or silence all electronic devices and computer notifications during the meeting. That concludes my remarks. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the chair's report? Operator, is there any remote public comment on the chair's report?
Yes, we have 1 remote public comment. Roland, go ahead.
Thank you. Actually, it's not a comment, it's a question. It's initially the loan was supposed to be $750 million, not $590. So the question to the chair, does anybody know why there is this $160 million delta instead of the full $750 million amount? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Does staff have any comment on that question? Probably of interest to the CAC.
Absolutely. Marie Lombardo, Chief Deputy, and I'm going to cheat and have Martin come up because he's going to do a 2 for us, also bring up the info item. Martin, the question was, how come the loan that got approved for the transit operators is quite a bit lower than the number that had been sought earlier?
That's a great question. Good evening, CAC members. Martin Reyes, Principal Transportation Planner. I don't know if we exactly have an explanation. The state budget deal that was negotiated last year did say up to $750 million in loans, so it didn't necessarily guarantee the entire amount. We did hear that there are specific amounts that the operators were seeking, for example, $200 million, I believe, for SFMTA, a bit more, around $280 for BART. So I would imagine there was some discretion exercised in the agencies securing only as much as needed. But I don't know, Maria, if you remember anything else from this issue.
I would just add and use this as an excuse to thank all the people who participated, including Alicia Jean-Baptiste in the mayor's office, MTC, and folks. It was a very long and difficult negotiation. It was hard to do, so this may have been the best they could have gotten. Maybe their exact needs changed slightly too during the process, but we're very happy to see.
Thank you both so much. If there's no other public comment, then we can move on. And since we're still in workshop mode, I think if we're able to move to an information item, that would be wonderful. And then hopefully we'll have quorum by the time we get to an action item. So, yeah, oh great, yeah, the curbside EV charging. Item 7. SFMTA curbside EV charging initiatives update. Our next presentation will be delivered by SFMTA's manager, Taxi Access and Mobility Services, Danny Young, and Broderick Paulo, planner, parking and curb management. And I also appreciate SF Environment staff joining in case of questions as well. Welcome. CAC members, if you recall, in June of 2024, the CAC approved the Prop L citywide modal planning 5-year prioritization program, which included $150,000 for SFMTA's curbside electric vehicle charging initiative. At the time, members indicated interest in hearing more about this initiative at a future meeting. This presentation also gives the CAC a chance to provide input on the initiative prior to considering allocation of the Prop L funds, which may be agendized at an upcoming meeting.
Hi, CAC members. I'm Danny Young. I'm the Permits Manager over at SFMTA's Taxis, Access, and Mobility Services. Are you able to hear me now? Oh, great. Okay. Hi, everyone. Committee members. I'm Danny Young. I'm the Manager of Permits and Administration over at SFMTA's Taxis, Access, and Mobility Services.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Broderick Paulo. I'm a planner in the Parking Curb Management Group at SFMTA. Our goals for today are to share the findings of the feasibility study, provide an update on our demonstration pilot, as well as outline our future long-term curbside program. Alrighty, to set the stage, MTA has a long-standing commitment to improving air quality by prioritizing low-carbon transportation. Among our key achievements, we operate one of the greenest revenue fleets in the country. Additionally, we have installed chargers at MTA-owned facilities to support both public charging and electrification of our non-revenue fleet. Now, we would like to fill the gap by putting chargers at the curb. In collaboration with the Department of the Environment, Department of Public Works, and the Public Utilities Commission, the study set out to explore whether it was feasible from an operational, financial, and regulatory perspective to install, maintain, and operate a public-facing charging network at the curb. The study identifies the risks and opportunities of operating a curbside network and identified practical solutions and recommendations to advance the network beyond the current pilot phase, particularly to support renters and multifamily unit residents without on-site charging. This work is guided by the city's clean transportation commitments in the 2021 Climate Action Plan, as well as California Air Resource Board Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulations. Of course, as a transit-first policy, we prioritize walking, biking, rolling, and transit. At the same time, we recognize that many residents, commuters, and visitors still rely on vehicles. So where vehicles are necessary, we aim to support zero-emission options. The study found curbside charging to be one small piece of the puzzle to ensure the right infrastructure is in place to achieve our goals. One of the biggest challenges is navigating the complex permitting and regulatory process. We can also expect hurdles with the electrical grid in terms of access, cost to upgrades, and overall readiness. Our analysis shows revenue generation is feasible for both the city and the vendor, provided implementation is thoughtful and strategic. Gathering and integrating the community's transportation priorities are important considerations, and strong community engagement should help guide deployment. These factors reinforce the need to site intentionally, building not just chargers, but a connected network. A network that avoids conflicts with existing or planned street uses, like transit lanes or bikeways, all while avoiding our wonderful commercial corridors. Lastly, we are exploring mechanisms to identify vendors capable of operating a reliable, well-maintained network that also supports a sustainable revenue approach. In June of 2024, we launched a pilot with the spirit of learn by doing to begin testing a variety of curbside models at a handful of locations to prepare for a scalable program. We designed the program to be technology agnostic, which gave vendors the flexibility to bring in a variety of curbside charging products. That includes chargers mounted to existing utility poles, pedestal chargers, and even a bring your own cord model. These lower power level 2 chargers target locations with a high density of renters and multi-unit dwellings as a complement to workplace, fleet, and public charging. For the pilot, vendors propose sites that work best for their technology and take on full responsibility to own, energize, install, operate, and maintain these chargers. Sites must account for accessibility and avoid transit, bike, and commercial corridor conflicts. For the demonstration pilot, Public Works issues an emerging technology permit. The initial permit lasts for 2 years with the option of it being extended to 10. The emerging technology permit is available as a short-term permitting mechanism to test out new innovations with the goal of informing the development of new permits that may be needed. We are now at the stage we need to create a long-term permit scale programming. The pilot is currently working to complete one demonstration site with each of our approved vendors. Climate Week of 2025, It's Electric launched our inaugural site in DuBose Triangle using a bring your own cord model and tapping into the fronting property's excess panel capacity. Next month, Urban EV will be seeking MTA board approval to install 5 pedestal chargers in the dog patch by establishing a new electrical service with PG&E. And finally, mounting to existing utility poles, VoltPost is working with PG&E and SFPUC to assess feasibility for their model. We expect the last 2 pilot sites to be operational within the next 6 to 9 months. And here we are celebrating the ribbon cutting of our first inaugural site at Herman and Fillmore. Fun fact, this location is fronting the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Local 6 Union Hall. So It's Electric was able to team up with them and use union labor to get this installation completed. Through this pilot, we've learned the permitting process to be complicated as a suite of agencies has the authority and jurisdiction over the public right-of-way, adjacent private parcels, and the energy grid. One of our biggest takeaways is the importance of providing vendors with clear, upfront siting requirements to help guide site selection. Community readiness will also be critical as we expand charging infrastructure. Full-mounted charging continues to present regulatory challenges with SFPUC and PG&E. With all that said, our 2 chargers that are currently in the ground now are performing extremely well, achieving a strong average daily utilization rate of about 60%. With that, I'll pass it over to Danny to walk through the future citywide permanent program.
So as we develop the permanent program, we have a lot of lessons learned. So now we want to move towards legislating a permanent program because we cannot stick to a pilot program indefinitely. So at some point we have to convert it to a permanent program, and we are at that point now. So our goal for the future is to have vendors still apply for this program, be a competitive application to vet from a list of vendors. One should be operating and looking for sites to install on our streets in San Francisco at the curbside. And then from there, we will review those applications, select them, and then from that qualified group of vendors can then work with the community, renting property owners, also potential power providers to get them the power to provide EV curbside charging. And then they will submit the application to the SFMTA for us to review. And then if we review and approve it, then there will be the installation process. So the risk is all on the vendor side to do, where they do the site selection and review and installation and maintain the equipment. So it is very limited risk to SFMTA, so that we don't have to outlay financial to construct it, because we are in SFMTA is in a fiscal crisis. Is this better? As just mentioned earlier in the prior informational item that the SFMTA is having funding challenges. So our goal is to not utilize any public funds for the actual permit program. So with that, we have a bunch of tools that we're developing to help support potential vendors and actually selected vendors. So we have, like, for example, a potential map for where they can consider installing it. So again, this is a work in progress. It's just a draft. I don't have to go over this in detail since it's just a list of potential sites that they can install. It's up to the vendors to propose an actual site by working with those property developers or whoever owns the fronting property to either connect to their power source or to connect to a power provider directly, such as PG&E or the SFPC, depending on who services that location. And then we will also consider what on-street conditions exist. So, for example, we don't want to interfere with munis, so we'll block, not allow anything to be located at or near a muni stop, or say a red zone or a fire hydrant. And then so what we were asking here today at an upcoming future meeting, the next meeting, March 25th meeting, is we will request some startup monies to help develop the legislation and the permit terms and conditions and the application process. And then future funding for this will be cost neutral or help us generate revenues. This is, as Brody said earlier, this is a very targeted program for those limited circumstances where there is no easy access to off-site charging, such as in their own building or a garage, whether it's a commercial garage or a SFMTA-owned garage or lot. So again, our goal is to not impact the MTA budget at all, and hopefully we might be able to make some money, but we'll need some startup funds.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. Member Levine.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I see that you're going to be targeting renters and residents of large multi-unit buildings, people without garages. And so will this curbside charging program take away parking spaces, more parking spaces in the streets?
Thank you for that question. We wouldn't be taking away parking spaces. We would be repurposing them for the exclusive use of EV charging.
Words out maybe 10%.
I'm not exactly sure of what percentage of people would be using them. I can say from our pilot site, it's at a 60% utilization rate, and that's only 2 spots in DuBose Triangle.
Do you have a sense about how many spaces will be lost to other parkers besides EV users?
Could you clarify that question?
Well, I'm wondering about how many spaces will be repurposed. Maybe that's the word.
Yes, absolutely. Right now, our goal is 100 chargers in the city for curbside. That's a floor, not a ceiling. That's what we're aiming for right now as we develop this long-term permitting program.
I would also like to add that public outreach is a critical component of that. And during that outreach, it is up to the vendors to propose sites. And so the vendors have to be able to make profit and also pay the permit fees. And also there has to be enough demand from the neighborhood to support this. So they will reach out to the neighborhood to see, do they want an EV charger and at which location, connect with the property owner or fronting power source. So they will likely not propose anything if they cannot get buy-in from the neighbors if there are no users. We anticipate that it will be highly likely in areas where there is high EV usage, EV vehicle usage.
Just one last point that we have lost so many parking spaces in the city due to the curb painting, and in my neighborhood alone, within a 2-block area, I lost 14 parking spaces. So this concerns me quite a bit that these spaces will not be available to the public at large, only to those targeted for EV charging. I ride a motorcycle, so not a problem for me, but certainly I've heard plenty of feedback about the loss of parking spaces, and this is a real problem.
We are not planning on reducing the number of parking spaces. We are trying to accommodate as future statewide mandates require new vehicles to be sold as electric vehicles. We are trying to accommodate so that when you do park, you can also dual charge your car at the same time as park. So when you're parking there for a couple hours in these residential neighborhoods, that you can get your car charged at the same time. It's intended to save residents time from having to hunt down a charger and also separately go to another charging spot just to sit there and wait. So when you park near your home or your residential multifamily location, you can have your vehicle charged.
Member Bars?
Thank you for the presentation. I represent District 7, and I've talked about this item with all of my fellow neighbors, knowing that this is coming. And I would say there's a lot of, I was met with a few varied views. In learning that the target is 100 chargers is very helpful. That's good to know. When you say that it's a floor, not a ceiling, is there a ceiling?
We haven't come to that conclusion yet. If there is a ceiling, of course, we want to, like Danny said, meet demand where there is demand. So if a neighborhood would like more charging invested and prioritized, that would be one of our first moves.
Okay. All right. I mean, that's a reasonable response. I would like to be sold by this item, but I have to admit that I'm not yet. But here's one thing that you could help me with. Could you tell me, you said in one of the earlier slides that you would work around areas where there's bike lanes and transit lanes at the curb and maybe other fixed curb uses. Could you just talk to me about how you would site these around those?
Absolutely. And back to Committee Member Levine's point, our first priority at SFMTA is, of course, safety in our multimodal network. We know that San Francisco has a high demand for curb space and several competing uses, whether that's access for people in the form of loading zones or bus stops, public space in our wonderful parklets, storage for vehicles, and then movement in the forms of transit and bikeways. So with these considerations, staff will always consult the bike, transit, and paratransit teams as we go to site these charging stations in the future.
Okay, so, all right, so let me just make sure I'm following. So basically, one of the, approvers, for lack of a better term, from a process perspective, will be these teams within MTA to identify if there's a conflict or not. Is that correct? That's correct, and it will be current design or a future design, say in the biking and rolling plan and our North Star map. If it's proposed on one of those streets that will have a dedicated bike lane, we would move away from that and ask the vendor to site somewhere nearby where a conflict with transit or bike would not come up. Okay, that's helpful. And then one more question for me. The map. I did notice in the materials that was draft, and I believe Mr. Young, you said that was for example. Could you will there be a map? Could you speak to why that's an example and what the future of said map is?
Yeah, so this map is a tool intended to help both SFMTA staff and also potential applicants to quickly identify which sites are not feasible due to a technical reason, such as what Brody just described, or it may be something that requires more evaluation, such as, hey, it might be on a very steep slope, it might not be the best location, and then maybe a green area where there's no obvious obstructions that they can just look at that location in more detail, is intended to help the private companies narrow down their focus instead of looking at a wide everywhere throughout the city. It's what are some possible locations that are the most easiest to implement technically, but there is still a requirement to do public outreach and for them to make sure that there's actual users there. The risk is low to SFMTA. Financial risk is low. At the end of the day, this is a permit application for them to go, say, fish for good sites.
Yeah, that is smart. I like that. I think it would be helpful to me as a CAC member to have it clearly documented. What does green mean? Because I would imagine every company is going to look at that and look for the green spots because that's going to mean the least amount of review. So what does green mean? That kind of information would be very helpful. And I did want to just say one thing, which is that I really appreciate that you're coming and we're having this opportunity for feedback now before you come for the final approval item. That's very much appreciated. So thank you.
Thanks again for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. One is you mentioned that the initial site has 60% utilization, I think. Does that mean that 60% of the time there's someone parked there or actively using it, or can you park there without actively using it? I'm not sure how that works.
Yes, thank you for that question. You're not able to park there if you're not plugged in and actively charging. We have that in the overhead street sign. It says for electric vehicle charging only. All other posted regulations apply, meaning you have to still move your car for street cleaning. And then if you do have a residential parking permit, you're able to charge there as long as you need. However, if you don't have the permit, you're limited to that visiting hour of 2 hours, and then you need to vacate the spot and move off the block.
Okay, and so if you do have the residential parking permit, do we know when you're fully charged, or is it sort of an honor system? How does that work? Great
question. So when you are fully charged, after you're fully charged, you'll start incurring an idling fee. The idling fee only takes place during the day. I believe after 10 p.m. to maybe 8 a.m., you no longer incur an idling fee, and that's to not have people jumping up in the middle of the night and moving their car at 2 in the morning.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And then my other question, as somebody who I don't own any vehicle, let alone an electric one, what is the landscape like today as far as do a lot of parking garages in denser areas already have these, and this is more an effort to fill in where those don't exist, or are we using SFMTA owned garages today for electric vehicle charging?
Yes, absolutely. Our SFMTA-owned lots, including our lots and garages, we currently have 55 dual port chargers. Just alone, those bring in about $300,000 per year annually to the MTA. And over the next 3 years, we will be installing another 250 in our MTA-owned lots and garages.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's really helpful.
Right. So our curbside charging will be to fill the gap for people who don't have access to overnight charging.
Great, thank you. If there are no other questions immediately from members, is there any public comment in the room on this item?
I'd just like to announce that we now have quorum.
Yes, thank you, Edward Mason. The white zone is for loading, and if it says taxi cab on it, it's taxi cab only. So the value of that curb space is $250,000. So I think that we ought to consider what the market rate is for this curb zone that's going to be used for charging. as far as the electricity rates go, San Jose charges on your electric bill 5%. That goes to the city. And then there's an additional user franchise surcharge on your electric bill in San Jose. So I look at this as a possible revenue stream for transit use by applying this. We're right now in the research and development phase, and we will be providing Prop L money for that. I would hope that that Prop L money would be then returned to us, because this is a research and development project, and it should be, pay the freight by the users. And really, it boils down to being a convenience tax, because this is a convenience for the individuals that are going to be using the service. And back east, they utilize a reservation service on the internet for the yellow zone for delivery zones for trucks and stuff. So I think it would behoove us to incorporate a web reservation system to speed up efficiency for the use of this. And
Thank you for your comment.
All right, that's it.
Thank you for your comment. There's no other public comment in the room. Operator, is there any remote public comment on this item?
Yes, there's one remote public comment. Roland, go ahead. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm echoing what everybody has been saying about losing parking spaces. I think that's an issue. And there really is no reason to go there. And the thing that concerns me is what the proposal here is for level 2, which is basically, if you really want to charge a car, this is going to take between 6 and 8 hours, which is basically good for overnight charging. Don't really understand the business model during the day. Now, there's been some mention, and I think that's where you really want to go, is right now Muni has got a lot of spare capacity. Actually, this is what impacted their revenues, is the parking revenue is gone. And you can basically restore that revenue by installing level 3 chargers, which will charge your cars in about 30 minutes. Not quite as fast as putting gas, but that's a general idea. And then you could actually, rather than getting into the business of investing or doing God knows what, you just lease the space to commercial vendors like Iona, EVgo, Electrify America, etc. Another thing that you've got to consider is the advantages of letting these people using existing parking spaces in shopping mall. Yeah, you got this massive shopping hall that used to be a Westfield that looks like it's going to be shut down in San Francisco. And then the last thing that you're overlooking, I don't know if you do that in San Francisco, but in San Jose, yes, I can charge for 39 cents per kilowatt. However, I got to pay 10% in sales taxes. And sales taxes, in turn, is what's going to go back to revenue. And on convenience tax, please don't go there. Otherwise, you're going to have to start charging a convenience tax for people who fill up with gas. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your comment. Well, this was an information item, so thank you both so much for attending, and yeah, appreciate the update. Thank you. Okay, now that we have quorum, yeah, I think back to the top. Great, okay. So we're gonna move back to item 3, approve the minutes of the January 28, 2026 meeting. This is an action item. Do any CAC members have any questions or comments on the minutes? Not seeing any. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on item 3? Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment on the minutes?
There's no remote public comment for item 3.
Great. May I have a motion and a second to approve item 3? Moved by Member Imadudin, seconded by Member Milford Rosales. Madam Clerk, can we please get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve the minutes, item 3 on Member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels.
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford. Ford, absent. Member Imadudin.
Imadudin, aye.
Imadudin, aye. Member Kim. Kim, absent. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita. Margarita, absent. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega. Ortega, absent. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 6 ayes. The minutes are approved.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to item 4, adopt a motion of support to adopt the District 2 Safety Study final report. We have a presentation from Transportation Planner Alex Pan. Welcome, Ms. Pan.
Good evening, CAC members. So today I'll be presenting the final recommendations from the District 2 Safety Study. We did brief Member Levine on this topic earlier this month, and note that this study hasn't been brought to the CAC before, but it's going to be one of the last 2 TA-led studies that won't have an interim CAC update prior to the final deliverable. And also we have Jennifer Molina on the line from SFMTA to answer any questions. So this study was requested by former Commissioner Stephanie and funded by the Transportation Authority's Neighborhood Program. We conducted the study in partnership with SFMTA to improve safety and access to places in District 2 that attract vulnerable road users, so parks, schools, healthcare facilities. We focused our work in 5 locations across the district that have a high concentration of these types of places. Other criteria we considered was whether an area had received recent treatments, as we wanted to focus on places in the district that potentially haven't had recent projects. So on Monday, Chair Siegel, you asked whether Franklin Street was in our study area because of the fatality that occurred there in 2021. Not include Franklin Street in the study because the SFMTA recently had a quick build project on Franklin in response to this fatality, which concluded in 2022. And SFMTA is also exploring longer term options for Franklin Street. As an outcome of this study, we're recommending near-term quick build and longer-term improvements that are specific to each of the study areas. The recommendations were selected with feedback from public outreach. There's also funding set aside for the detailed design and implementation of near-term improvements, which I'll talk about in more detail later in the presentation. We conducted 2 rounds of community outreach, engaging with about 200 to 300 people total through online surveys, a virtual town hall, and in-person events. In the first round of outreach in summer 2024, we heard that speeding, distracted driving, and lack of traffic enforcement were major issues across the district. We also heard that each of the 5 study areas had unique safety challenges and preferences for quick build treatments, so we used this feedback to develop proposed improvements, which we shared with the community last fall. Comments from this round of outreach helped refine the final recommendations. This is a summary showing the location of the final recommendations, and on the next slides I'll go into more detail on each one. So as you can see, the improvements are spread throughout the district, and again, this list was developed and refined through 2 rounds of public outreach. In the Marina study area, we're recommending more visible LED signage to reinforce the existing no right on red restriction, as well as striping to enhance safety and visibility on the south side of the intersection. In the near term, we'll also add signage to reinforce the crosswalk closure on the east side of the intersection. In the longer term, our recommendation is to study a full intersection redesign, which could include adding a new crosswalk on the east side. We also recommend studying further bike improvements and connections to Fort Mason Park. In the Pacific Heights study area, we're recommending traffic calming measures, which could be speed humps, speed cushions, or speed tables near Lafayette Park. The exact type and number of traffic calming devices will be determined in the detailed design phase. We're also recommending to reevaluate the balance of commercial and passenger loading zones near the healthcare facility at Clay Webster to reduce double parking and pedestrian visibility challenges. In the Anza Vista study area, we're recommending traffic calming measures, and again, the exact type and number of these devices will be determined in the detailed design phase. Also in the Anza Vista study area, we're recommending a number of signage and wayfinding changes to help cyclists turn from westbound Geary to southbound Masonic. This includes modifying the concrete island entrance to the bike lane on Masonic Avenue, which we observed that many cyclists have difficulty navigating. We are also recommending lead pedestrian intervals at all crosswalks to enhance pedestrian visibility. In the Presidio Heights neighborhood, our near-term recommendation, which will be referred to the SFMTA bike parking program, to identify locations for short-term and long-term secure bike parking options. Examples of bike parking are bike corrals, lockers, or bike hangars. In the Cathedral Hill neighborhood, we're recommending painted safety zones, which increase pedestrian visibility and help slow turning speeds. There are 5 potential intersections where these can be installed, and the exact locations will be determined in the detailed design phase. So the final report includes a discussion of the cost estimates for our study recommendations. The near-term recommendations have a total cost of about $430,000 and can be funded through the remaining previously allocated neighborhood transportation funds, which are being held in reserve pending completion of this study. The Transportation Authority Board may release these funds following the adoption of this study, and the detailed design and implementation would be led by SFMTA and would start later this year. The final report also identifies potential funding sources for the longer-term recommendations at the Bay Laguna intersection, which are estimated to cost between $200,000 and $250,000. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Member Levine.
Yeah, thanks so much for the presentation and for the previous presentation to me. Thank you. Just had a comment and a question. The study was initiated by Supervisor Stephanie, and I had some concern about whether new Supervisor Sherrill had any input, but I think you assured me at some point that the staff has carried over, and so there's no issue there. Supervisor Sherrill is well aware of the situation at this point, and if you had any recommendations, they would have been made.
Yeah, yes, that's right. We're working with the same staff person from former Commissioner Stephanie's office.
Right. The only question I have is, I don't think it was in the study area, but I have received quite a bit of feedback about the concerns about the Balboa High School area and some of the congestion and dangerous conditions surrounding vehicles, especially with the high school there. And it's obviously it's not a part of this study, but is there any way that the area around Balboa High School could be incorporated at some point into the study?
I think we did hear that in a previous community meeting. We can include it as a location, like a potential future location for a study in the final report. And there's also the walk audit program through SFMTA if there are transportation challenges.
Thank you. Thank you.
Member Bars.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. You answered my first 2 questions already, so that's exciting. I have a third question that I had come prepared with, and then I also have a new question. So the question that I had come prepared with is, why are these neighborhood transportation studies limited to quick builds? Like, why are we only really recommending quick build type projects?
So I wouldn't say they're limited to quick builds, but in this particular case, the former Commissioner Stephanie, her primary interest was in using the neighborhood funds to do something that could be implemented fairly quickly. So she had the full amount of the NTIP funds available, wanted to spend as much of that as possible on implementation. And so we used a small amount for the planning, which is this study is the outcome of that, and the remainder of those funds will be used for implementation.
Got it. Okay, great. That really directly answers my question. Thank you. And then in terms of selecting the study areas, I read the report, I read the methodology. That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, were there study areas that were not included, like that were considered but not included?
I think in the report there's a list of locations that were considered and not, maybe these are specific locations within each of the study areas. I think in a previous iteration of the study areas, they were bigger. So when we went out and did our field observations, we made the study areas like smaller and kind of more manageable to do outreach in them.
Okay, so you started with these like 5, but they had a larger radius and they shrunk?
Yes, that's right.
And can I just ask, like, is it like what? I mean, that's not crazy for the record. I'm just like methodologically, why did they shrink? Like, it's probably not for reasons on the ground, right? Or is it?
I think we'll have a technical appendix for this in the final report that goes through kind of the process in more detail and like what data we used for coming up with the study area maps. It was more like, you know, we had a pretty large study area, and when we did observations, there were like clear zones within that larger radius area that had the most challenges. So, for example, a study area might have included some more residential streets, and we like exclude from the final study area.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for following up on my question about the Franklin Street considerations. I do remember there being a smaller quick build. I was wondering if maybe staff might be able to comment on. I had thought that there was a plan at one point to road diet Franklin more comprehensively from 3 lanes to 2 lanes that had been paused or discontinued. I was just wondering if you all could confirm whether that was true and what happened there and whether that was considered as part of this study.
I think I would direct that question to Jennifer if you're on the line from SFMTA. She may have the name of the project manager for the Franklin Street Quick Build, and they would know the answer.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Hi,
yes.
good evening. That's correct. So oops, let me start my video here. Just make sure my video. Okay, can you see me okay? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Jennifer Molina, Senior Transportation Planner at the MTA. In terms of your question, for Franklin, at this point, our Franklin Quick Build project and efforts are completed. Obviously it was completed in 2022, followed by an evaluation and then some follow-up with our retiming. So if there's any specific questions that I'm happy to connect you with the PM to answer your questions. But at this time, the project is completed. So I don't have any comments on the road diet. I don't have that information, but again, our contact is happy to connect with you offline if you need that.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. I would love to connect this with someone who knows a bit more about, what happened with the road diet plan. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And so I don't know if maybe I'll connect with Alex after this, and we can connect you on via email.
Great. Thank you so much. If there are no other questions or comments from members, is there any public comment in the room on this item? Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment on this item?
There's no remote public comment for this item.
Great. Public comment on this item is closed. Member Bars, did you have another thought?
I just wanted to make a comment. So I wanted to also acknowledge and appreciate the comment that you made, Ms. Pan, about studies coming to the CAC before the final report. I really respect that and appreciate that very much. I had been coming into this meeting prepared to abstain from this vote, considering that there hadn't been any discussion of this, but given acknowledging that change, and also the fact that you'd engaged with Member Levine, that's persuaded me, and also your thoughtful responses to my answers, that's persuaded me that I should support this. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you very much for doing that, and that's definitely earned my support for this tonight.
Great. May I have a motion and a second to approve item 4? Moved by Member Levine, seconded by Member Bars. Madam Clerk, would you please get a roll call vote? Sure. Without objection, same house, same call. Okay, great. The motion is approved. Thanks again so much for the presentation. We'll move on to item 5, adopt a motion of support to appropriate $75,000 in Prop L funds with conditions for federal autonomous vehicle policy development. This is an action item, and this presentation will be delivered by Principal Transportation Planner John Paul Velez. And we also have Senior Public Policy Manager Amber Crabb to assist with questions. Welcome.
Good evening. Yeah, this works fine. I'm a little under the weather, so I'd rather wear this mask for everyone's benefit. Jean Paul Velez, Principal Planner. Today I'm presenting on a proposed Propel appropriation for federal AV policy. There we go. As a bit of context, this is a map of the regulatory framework for autonomous vehicles in the U.S. I've shared this slide before in prior presentations, so I won't kind of dwell too much on the details, but at a federal level, AVs are regulated by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration under the U.S. DOT, and it's charged with establishing, monitoring, and enforcing vehicle safety standards. That being said, to this day, there's no such standards specifically for autonomous vehicles at the federal level. At the state level, we have the Department of Motor Vehicles that awards permits for testing and deployment of AVs in California public roads. And we have the California Public Utilities Commission that permits AV passenger services. Now, locally, we do not have any permitting authority over AVs. And most of our policy efforts need to be channeled through the legislative process or through rulemaking processes. At the federal level, the Transportation Authority has advocated for the adoption of AV standards, transparent performance evaluation, and open data reporting. Last year, we collaborated with Representative Kevin Mullen on the AV Safety Data Act, a bill that he introduced last year. The bill aims to codify into law crash reporting requirements for AVs and to support safety evaluation with additional data on vehicle immobilizations and vehicle miles traveled. This year, Representative Mullen also requested additional support on a broader set of complex policy issues for AVs that we will kind of detail more in a second. And we have also been invited by the Federal Highway Administration to participate in an AV peer exchange program to inform federal AV policy. Earlier this year, and this is the critical juncture here, Representative Bob Latta from Indiana introduced in Congress the Self-Drive Act. This is a bill that establishes the first federal statutory framework, or is proposing to, for governing AVs. And the bill places the onus of AV safety assurance on providers' development of safety cases. In turn, it preempts state and local governments from any role in AV safety assurance. And additionally, it narrows the scope of AV crash reporting to the federal government. Our concern is that this bill only offers qualitative guidance on the contents of a safety case. It does not offer any type of enforceable standards to actually certify against. The lion's share of the permitting requirements established here in California to ensure the safety of AV providers, such as certifying the safety performance of your ADS deck in simulations and on test tracks, submitting of to the DMV for review the limitations of your service area and operational conditions, your training of remote operator programs, emergency response plans, et cetera. All of that no longer would apply. And this is at the heels of a forthcoming update of the DMV autonomous vehicle regulations that we've been participating on for the last year. California AV regulations are not perfect, but they're also the strongest regulations in the country for AVs. So there's more work to do, but yeah, we want to continue building on what's already been developed there. Yes. As such, we believe that this is an important time-sensitive opportunity to shape federal AV policy in ways that will directly affect San Francisco. The bill has already moved out of its subcommittee, and in addition, there's been Senate hearings on AV policy. So we believe that it is critical that we work with our representatives in DC and with peer cities to advocate for our policy priorities and to prevent harmful policies such as federal preemption. This funding request aims to support our engagement on AV policy development at the federal level, developing a federal strategy in coordination with peer cities and other partners, advising our legislators on what is rather complex technical matter in regards to federal AV policy, and advising the FHWA and peer cities on how to strengthen federal AV policy. The request is for $75K, out of which $60K are allocated for federal policy development and technical assistance, $10K is to participate in the FHWA peer exchange program, and $5K are for project management. This work is already ongoing, so we are requesting a waiver to kind of fund to cover our efforts that have started or have taken place this month already. And we think that this work would be completed no later than December of this year. That I conclude my presentation.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from members? Member Levine.
Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted some clarification. Did you say that we are looking for a way to preempt federal control over the state and local governments? Is
the
that
federal
one
government,
of your recommendations?
The bill that has been introduced in Congress is preempting states.
Right. So. And that is something that will we oppose it?
Yes, we advise against it.
I just wanted clarification about that. Thank you. It's bad enough that the state controls the municipalities in California, but if the feds come in and control both the state and local governments, it'll be a disaster. Thank you.
Member Imaduddin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question on the Task 3. What exactly does the peer exchange look like?
So that's ongoing and still kind of being planned, but roughly it involves first, we've identified a first ring of cities that are kind of first adopters, so ourselves, Phoenix, Austin, those that kind of have had extensive testing and deployment of AVs. So from those experiences, they want to, on the one hand, develop AV policy at the federal level, and on the other, advise like the new kind of generation of cities that is coming in. As you have heard, I'm sure, kind of plans for expansion for many of these AV providers. So it's also to pass on some of our know-how to those other cities.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Member Milford Rosales.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for getting started on this. That I saw the HR bill, the House bill earlier, and it looks very, very, very bad in my personal opinion. And I think it would be great to be able to get in and be able to offer any influence federal legislation based on the very extensive experience we've had in San Francisco compared to the rest of the country. So thank you very much again.
I also want to express my appreciation for you all spearheading this work, and good luck. There are no other questions or comments from members. Is there any public comment in the room on this item? Not seeing any. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
There's no remote public comment for item 5.
Great. Can I get a motion and a second to approve this item? Moved by Member Barr, seconded by Member Milford Rosales. I think we could take this one same house, same call without objection. Great. The motion is approved. Thank you so much for the presentation. All right, moving on to item 6, adopt a motion of support to appropriate $97,000 in Prop L funds with conditions for Caltrain Governance 2026 work program and ad hoc committee support. Rail Program Manager Jesse Kaler will now present this item. Welcome, Mr. Kaler.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee members. I just have some brief verbal remarks to walk through the item that was included in your packet. This item is a request from SFCTA staff to appropriate $97,000 in Prop L funds to fulfill a request to provide San Francisco staff support to a very significant body of work already underway this calendar year to progress the governance of the Caltrain organization. By way of very brief background, Caltrain is a very unique entity from a governance perspective. It is a joint powers board formed at the agreement of the 3-member counties of Santa Clara, San Mateo, and San Francisco. Railroad is governed by a 9-member board of directors with 3 appointees from each county. Since the agency's formation in the 90s, San Mateo County Transit District, or SamTrans, has served as the managing agency of Caltrain, and in this role provides the staff and administrative support to the railroad under a shared services arrangement. In 2022, in follow-up to Measure RR having been successfully passed by the 3 counties' voters, the 3 Caltrain counties and Caltrain entered into a 4-party memorandum of understanding to reform the governance of the railroad, including to provide the Caltrain board with the authority to hire a dedicated executive director. MOU also committed the parties to multiple follow-up actions, including, among other tasks, work to bring forward amendments to Caltrain's governing agreements, establish a shared services agreement between SamTrans and Caltrain, and numerous other commitments. Last month, at its January 8th meeting, the Caltrain board deliberated on a motion concerning the railroad's governance. The motion was brought forward by Director Shaman Walton, who serves as one of San Francisco's 3 appointees to the board. The motion, which was modestly amended by the Caltrain board, directs that board's ad hoc committee on governance to oversee a program of work to, among other activities, bring forward recommended amendments to Caltrain's governing documents, advance the shared services agreement, and advance Caltrain's own salary ordinance. At the January 27th meeting of the Transportation Authority Board, Commissioner Walton requested that Transportation Authority staff provide support for this work program planned to advance this year, including to support Director Walton's participation in the ad hoc committee, to which he is now the San Francisco representative. In response to Commissioner Walton's request, we've prepared the appropriation request before you this evening, which will allow us to effectively serve San Francisco in this time-sensitive and highly specialized set of work program activities, including technical review, policy analysis, and coordination with partner agency staffs. I will also note that one of the things that makes this work program particularly complex is not only its breadth of the underlying issues, but also the reality of relatively divergent views on some of them among the 3-member counties. The request is recommended as an off-the-top of the capital program appropriation in order to preserve Prop L programming in the Caltrain category as part of our annual member agency contribution to Caltrain. We will reconcile this programming in the next update to the PropL strategic plan. We are also seeking a waiver to allow funds to be used for expenditures starting February 1st, as this associated program of work is already well underway this month. That concludes my remarks. I'm happy to address any of the committee questions.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate that explanation. Member Bars.
I don't, it sounds reasonable, very reasonable for SFCTA staff to staff Commissioner Walton and his work on this commission, or excuse me, committee. My questions are more about, I think maybe it's in the memo and I read it quickly and I missed it, but I don't understand the time-sensitive nature. You just said something was time-sensitive. I'm not following what is time-sensitive. I'm also not, strictly speaking, following what the outcome of this is going to be. So, like, there's a work program to come up with some policy recommendations about Caltrain governance. I am aware that Caltrain governance has been a hot potato for going on 30 years. So that much I know, and I think a lot of people here probably know that too. But what are we going to do, and what are the divergent issues?
Those are all great questions, Member Bars. I'll try to scratch the surface at least a bit of all of them. When I'm referring to time sensitivity, that is in response to what is now a Caltrain board approved motion that calls for this work to advance over an approximately 6-month period over the course of this year. And so that ad hoc committee of the Caltrain board has started meeting on a monthly basis, and we need to both support Director Walton directly as well as coordinate with other San Francisco agencies to ensure that we're reflecting San Francisco's interests most effectively. In terms of the actual substance of the work and what it's driving at, one way of thinking of this is sort of the unfinished business of that 2022 MOU, which agreed to certain things, and as we often do in these agreements, agreed to keep working on several other things, including, and this is sort of the overarching outcome of this body of work, would be to codify agreements with respect to governance of the agency in a consolidated set of amendments to the Joint Powers Agreement, that is the overarching agreement. Sort of by accretion over the past 30 plus years, we now have multiple agreements that govern the railroad, and they have some inconsistencies both across each other and with respect to either current practice or what San Francisco may desire for the future of the railroad. On your last question with respect to what are some of the kernels of potentially divergent issues, I would say that the most significant among those has to do with the managing agency function and what the parameters of that would be. Going back to the 90s, the original governing document specified that SamTrans would be the managing agency, and at the same time, that function could be assigned to another party with 1 year's notice. Subsequently, and through a 2008 agreement, whereby SamTrans agreed to forego interest on some of its original investment in the right-of-way, that 2008 agreement said that SamTrans could serve as managing agency for as long as it chooses, effectively in perpetuity, should it choose to. Going forward, under the 2022 MOU, while that agreement acknowledged the role of SamTrans as managing agency, it significantly narrowed what was entailed with respect to a managing agency. So going forward, I can't speak as to what the policy direction will be either from San Francisco or the entire Caltrain board, but there are multiple potential approaches one could imagine for that managing agency topic. Could be that it stays exactly the way it is. Could be it goes back to that 1990s approach. Could be that, in fact, Caltrain may want to contract with one or more of its member agencies as it chooses in the future to deliver some of those administrative functions that historically SamTrans has provided. So those are sort of the some of the issues. There are others, including setting up Caltrain as an entity within the state pension system, which is a whole lot of complexity to ensure that employees are taken care of effectively as they may transition from SamTrans to Caltrain. So those are some of them.
Okay, great. Thank you for that very thoughtful answer. Really, that really helps. If I could just very quickly replay back what I heard, and you can say yes or no. So, the reason why it's time sensitive is that the Caltrain board said we got to work together on this. And that started last month. And that's why it's like, okay, we need some staff help to work together, and that's got to start now. Okay, cool. And the second thing is, there's been like a bunch of, I'm on the board of like a local club, and we've had bylaws changes, and it sounds like there's a whole bunch of like versions of bylaws over the years, and some of them contradict one another, and you have to sort it out. Did I get that bit right, more or less?
Yes, much more concisely than I did.
No, that's great. It's great. Okay, and then the third bit is really one of the main points of disagreement is about who is the the managing agency, and is that right?
I would say the provisions around the managing agency, what rights does it come with, and what oversight and potential changes might the board or the member agencies express with respect to the member agency?
Okay, love it. And then, okay, my last question, which I had chatted about with some folks, is like, I believe that the Metropolitan Transportation Commission now has like a network management committee, which is supposed to have some expertise or insight into how transit agencies govern themselves. I am not very familiar with this, but this is what I've learned. Are they at all involved in these discussions?
My understanding is they are not directly involved in this set of discussions. I suspect that is because network management has largely focused on regional integration and interfaces of the agency from a customer lens. This is much more focused on the Caltrain-specific sort of legalese that governs it and what the 3 member counties have agreed to work together on under that rubric.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from members on this item? If not, is there any public comment in the room on this item? Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment on this item?
Yes, we have one remote public comment. Roland, go ahead. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Yes, thank you. The only comment I would make about this being time sensitive is that Supervisor Walton, as far as I know, is turning out at the end of the year, and they've been dragging this thing for 4 years. I think they're basically waiting for him to turn out. So that's my 2 cents on that. Thank you.
Great. Public comment on this item is closed. May I get a motion and a second to approve this item? By Member Madudin, seconded by Vice Chair Daniels. And I think we can take this one also, same house, same call, without objection. Great, motion passes. Thank you so much again for the presentation. All right, let's move on to item 8, the Geary 19th Avenue Subway and Regional Connection Study update. We have a presentation from Principal Transportation Planner Andrew Heidel. Welcome, Mr. Heidel. Please use your microphone. Thank you so much.
Hi. Sorry, folks. I have not done one of these in a bit. Thank you, Chair. I'm Andrew Heidel, Principal Planner with the San Francisco County Transportation Authority. This is an informational update on the Geary 19th Avenue Subway and Regional Connection Study. So as described in the memorandum, the study team will be conducting a round of outreach via online town halls early next month. Thank you, Chair, for mentioning those in your opening remarks. And following this outreach, these findings that we'll present this evening are going to be further refined and presented in a final report, which we will bring back to this body as well as the board this spring for discussion, and potentially adoption. All right. So jumping right into it, the The concept of a subway under Geary Boulevard has been discussed for over 70 years, dating back to at least the original planning studies for the BART system in the 1950s. Since then, a number of studies and plans have consistently identified the need for a better connection between the west side and downtown San Francisco, including San Francisco's corridor plan in the upper right here on this slide, the city's 2016 subway vision, through this multiple citywide planning processes, including the Transportation Authority's San Francisco Transportation Plan. Throughout these studies, the needs of riders have been consistent: faster trips, less crowding, better connections, and maintaining a state of good repair. These years of work have also evolved our understanding of solutions, though. In this case, aligning a Geary subway with the new Transbay Rail crossing in the east and along 19th Avenue towards a connection in San Mateo County in the south will allow the project to act as a broader part of the regional East Bay to Peninsula connection while also serving parts of San Francisco that are today not well connected to the regional transit network. These needs and benefits were highlighted most recently in the 2024 update to the California State Rail Plan, which identifies connecting Western San Francisco into the statewide rail network as a long-term priority. So our current phase of work here picked up where the 2021 Transit Strategy, Connect SF, and off is work to refine the case for moving the Geary 19th Avenue subway forward while also developing a roadmap for our next step. Of that, planning for these kinds of generational investments is a multi-year, multi-step process. Identify a preferred alternative, that is the actual routing of the subway, where stations, locations might go, what kind of trains would actually run in the subway. Much more technical work and community conversations will need to happen. That's why we started now with our initial phase, where we reconfirm the case for the project and are working to lay out the roadmap through future phases and steps with relatively modest investment of time and resources up front that will help us advise the public, elected officials, and other decision makers about how and when to proceed as future phases grow in size and cost, as shown on the illustration here. Be clear that our goal at the conclusion of each of these phases, these big blocks, is to know enough to feel comfortable committing the resources needed to advance to the subsequent phase. So we're not looking to draw those lines on a map or make decisions about what a preferred alternative might be in this phase, the strategic planning phase highlighted there, nor have we done the technical work or outreach that would allow us to do this. That will come in the following alternatives and analysis. But we want to recognize that it's important to prompt conversations around the ingredients that would lead us to a successful project as we Before we go further, I do want to recognize a critical issue that we're facing today in the transit fiscal cliff. As you know, San Francisco and the region are weighing how to bolster transit funding to address operating shortfalls later this year. But as we just discussed, the planning, design, and funding of large projects like a new subway take a significant amount of time, and we see that advancing this work now is important to lay the groundwork for confirming our capital priorities and securing local, regional, state, and federal funding that will be required to deliver this project. I do want to recognize also that the funding used to support advancing the subway can't be used for sales tax, which also there here. And also, if we wait until our system is bursting at the seams, we'll already be decades behind. So doing this work now is a commitment to the long-term. And despite the disruptions brought on by the pandemic and the changes we've seen during and since that time with respect to San Francisco's population, travel patterns, and the way we live, San Francisco remains an attractive place to live and work. The assumptions about the future underpinning our planning work that I'll go through this evening are aligned with regional projections, which show that San Francisco is expected to grow 29% more jobs and 50% more residents by 2050. We're also just starting to understand from a data perspective what post-pandemic travel patterns look like. These assumptions will need to be revisited and revised over time as changes to travel patterns. We've also incorporated into our work the great feedback and questions we heard during our online town halls and community group meetings throughout 2024 and 2025, along with our online survey. Great response, and people were very interested in our online survey with over 2,400 responses. Feedback there mirrored what we heard in person. People are really excited about this project and understand its need. Those questions and concerns focused around cost and schedule, finding a way to move this work forward more quickly, about how any potential construction might affect streets and neighborhoods, including residents and business. Our first round of outreach, we also shared for feedback our high-level framework for thinking about the benefits of building a Geary 19th Avenue subway. Here, I'll touch on these now at a high level because you'll see these themes come through in how we share the results on the subsequent. First, how does the experience improve for travelers? Will this investment, will this subway help make transit easier, faster, and more attractive for more? Second, understanding the growth that is planned for San Francisco and the region. How can the project help serve both current needs and those that could arise from that growth? Can we ensure that benefits to existing residents, including those that have been historically disadvantaged or excluded, shared equitably? Third, can the project make contributions to larger local, regional, and statewide goals that might be beyond the scope of any one action, require everything we do to move in the right direction, thinking about affordability, climate, air quality. With that framework in mind, we set out to identify what key decisions that planners, engineers, community members, elected officials would need to make as the project advances. As importantly, what doors might be opened or closed by making those decisions. So again, as a reminder, not decisions we will or can make in this phase, but what we want to do here is identify an initial set areas where there are clear options, asking for agreement that these are indeed the key decisions. We can prepare the analysis and engagement that will help us move forward. The study is proposing what we see on the screen here, some high-level considerations that have significant implications for later planning and design work. In many cases, these decisions are interrelated. So if the project goes down a certain path on routing, for example, it may impact the technologies that are on the table, which may impact the ability to connect service directly, what we call through running, to the East Bay or San Mateo County. So please don't think of these as an ordered checklist. As you see them on the screen, each piece will impact the others. It will require all of us to weigh the priorities. So running through, how does the project connect to the regional network? Through run, what benefits, implications, or drawbacks does through running have versus making a passenger connection where someone would need to get off a train and transfer to another one? What neighborhoods and areas within San Francisco should be served directly and what can be served with connecting transit service? The study identified a couple of discrete options in downtown San Francisco, but more of a universe with many options in how to transition between Geary Boulevard and 19th Avenue, the east-west and north-south segments. What train technologies are best suited for a project like this? That decision, performance and station spacing, but as I mentioned, can also be tied to things like regional connectivity and project phasing. How do these choices help us understand how the project is expected to perform with respect to improvements in those three key areas: traveler experience, growth and economic success, and those larger policy goals? So we tested those key questions while identifying and exploring other considerations to understand what the subway project's range of benefits might be. We're happy off the top to see big improvements across all three of those key areas. I'll get into more of those in a moment in detail. We also identified what we'll recommend as other critical building blocks to advance as part of or in parallel to additional project planning: funding, land use, connecting transit, other supportive policies, all that we can bring to the table to help maximize the benefits we see and talk about in a second, potentially help pay for the project. On the next few slides, I'll share what we think those key takeaways are forward. So first, at a high level, the overall case for the project is and remains promising. It does have the potential to be an integral part of the regional and statewide rail system. San Francisco should continue to lead and advance planning for the project to prepare for the future, with the knowledge that maximizing project benefits also creates an opportunity to create value in travel time savings for travelers, the accessibility and value of land, and economic activity and productivity. Capturing and leveraging that value will be critical in underpinning the funding for the project, given its high capital cost. Our estimate here, just to be upfront, is $20 to $30 billion. We also note that there are trade-offs, that it's important to deliver benefits to existing residents and businesses while mitigating potential effects such as this, even while we angle to. Next, we've confirmed that regional connectivity is fundamental towards delivering the most amount of benefits to travelers and communities. The project does perform well as a San Francisco-only subway, but much better when it is integrated with the region's rail network. These benefits accrue not only to San Franciscans, but travelers across the region. So putting some numbers to that, depending on the route, a San Francisco-only subway could see between 160 and 180,000 trips per day, matching today's BART daily ridership as a point of reference. That could increase to over 300,000 trips per day with full regional connectivity. On an individual level, some trips to, from, and through San Francisco could get shorter by as much as 20 minutes with those regional connections. Trips from the west side of San Francisco to the airport or to Oakland or places. Our same analysis showed that multiple design options can deliver those benefits. So as the project advances, clear input from community members is going to be important to balance with technical considerations, make those selections of routes and potential station locations. Some project design decisions are likely more fixed, so the need to connect back to the regional rail system, as we just talked about, the need to find a place to store and service trains and rolling stock. But some other project decisions have the potential to drive ultimate costs. So as I mentioned, we currently estimate the full cost of the project to be between $20 and $30 billion. Future phases will also need to consider what phasing might be like for implementation. For example, there is an initial segment that can deliver some of these benefits at a smaller cost while anticipating and not precluding the full build-out of a project. So to give some examples of those potential design differences, there's only a small difference in overall system performance between the different downtown options or the curve to connect Erie and 19th Avenue. But who benefits can vary significantly. So while the top line ridership numbers might be the same, there are different types of trips and obviously different neighborhoods or destinations served directly depending on those choices. Speaking more to our passenger experience, regional, statewide climate, and equity goals, we found that this project moves the needle in the right direction in each of these versus a future where the project isn't built. Good news is that our analysis also shows that the people who benefit the most are those that live in communities that have been historically disadvantaged, excluded from the benefits of these kinds of major infrastructure investments, our equity priority community. To give some examples for that, the project increases the average San Francisco household's 45-minute transit job access accessibility. So plain English, how many jobs can someone access by transit within 45 minutes? By about 45,000 jobs, that's 6%. With the San Francisco only alignment, or up to 57,000 with regional connections. Folks that live in equity priority communities gain even more, with 57,000 to 72,000 additional jobs available. Don't have it on the screen, but some additional stats. The equity priority community residents represent about 20% of new boardings, but experience 50% time savings delivered by the project. We also found overall a citywide 4% VMT reduction. That's 400,000 miles per day, based on a 1 to 2%, depending on the option, increase in citywide transit and mode share. That sounds like a small number, but any one project moving the needle that much on those, that's pretty significant. As we think about what it will take to deliver the project, it also became evident that the benefits will need to be regionally significant. So not just the project itself, the connectivity benefits that it gets from being regionally connected, but spreading those benefits across the region to attract the full package of local, regional, state, and federal funds that will be required. So we touched on integration, but other supportive policies adopted by the city will need to underscore that as well, like land use, parking. We do expect the project to perform well under traditional federal criteria, which include under project justification, things like utility, environmental and congestion benefits, land use, and economic development. And San Francisco projects typically perform well on regional and national benefits. To position a project for success, our local strategy will typically come down to the local financial commitment. The best way for a project to be competitive is to demonstrate how we can afford it by providing the local match. This project will require more than Prop L sources alone to be. Moment of levity. So we'll need to think creatively about new places to look for funding, as existing sources beyond even Prop L are not enough to fund a project of this size. I talked earlier about the project delivering value in terms of travel time, land value, economic activities. Are there ways to recoup a meaningful portion of that value to contribute to the funding plan for the project? In any case, these sources are likely to be competitive, meaning that we should look to make decisions that maximize performance, minimize cost. Thinking about some of that value capture for a second, drawing a connection or nexus between the value the project could deliver, funding sources for the project will be important. San Francisco, the Bay Area, California have a history of developing innovative funding approaches in order to make general investments like this for our transportation system. Some of those examples are on the screen here. So are there ways to create a win-win by reducing vehicle congestion and funding transit improvements through road user charge, as has shown success recently in New York and the Chicago area? Or benefits like a benefit district joint development to bring some of the expected increase in land value back to the project. So I do want to be clear that none of these ideas are certain at this point, but it's important to further describe and develop them as the project advances. Understand where certain techniques can play an important role, but might be less effective. Finally, moving the project forward will require a mix of robust community input alongside additional technical development, planning, and engineering to inform project choices. Continued engagement and support from community members, of course, will be looking ahead to immediate next steps described in the memorandum in your packet. Study team and Marks will be conducting a round of outreach via online town halls early next month. Following the outreach, these findings will be further refined that I shared with you tonight and presented in the final report, which, as I mentioned, we'll bring back in the spring to the CAC and board for discussion, consideration, and adoption. We'll plan to include there an update on the immediate next phases for the project itself, as well as how the refinements and understanding we developed in this work can feed into some countywide and regional planning updates expected to launch this year, which can help us prioritize this amongst our other large potential capital transit investments. That concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Do any members have questions or comments on this item? Member Bars?
I'll lean into being the questioner tonight. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Heidel. I am very enthusiastic about this project. I think this is exactly the kind of long-term planning work we should be doing. I'm very delighted to read your very short memo in the packet about this. I also talked about it with several of my fellow residents, and there's also, I would agree with what you reported from your engagement or your public outreach, which is, I think I heard concern about how we would do it, certainly without like completely, you know, what's the word? How we could do it, learning lessons from other mega projects that we've done in the Bay Area. That I definitely heard a lot of those concerns, but also just like that there is a tremendous amount of support for this, certainly amongst some of the circles I travel in District 7. I have two questions, so and they're related. So the first is, I work a lot outside of the United States and with transit and rail providers outside of the United States. There's a lot to be learned from major projects. One very well documented one is the Crossrail project in England and, well, the cut through London. I'm curious, I'd just like to know, are you taking is this project planning being informed by what other mega projects have gone through and those outside of the Bay Area?
Good question, and definitely yes. So we have started to expand our circle. Obviously, there are projects, recently completed the Central Subway here in San Francisco. That's some immediate lessons learned in a same familiar context. BART to Silicon Valley in Santa Clara County, but the international examples as well. A lot of that, I think, will come to the fore in the project delivery methodology that is chosen as we start to get into potential design and delivery. But we want to make sure that we are not boxing ourselves into something that could be difficult or challenging or expensive in the future as part of the project planning. So for this early strategic case and planning phase, that's what I would highlight, is that it is still too early to make decisions about project delivery methods or construction methods or things like that. But it is exactly the right time to ask all of those project teams, what decisions do you wish you had made earlier, or what decisions that were made earlier have really paid off being able to deliver here. So we're just at the start of, obviously, the Crossrail Elizabeth line was a 20-plus year project as well. It's been a great success, so they certainly are inspiring and good benchmarks to look at.
Okay, yes, thank you. I think that's helpful, and that makes sense that given the stage that this project is in, where like how you would how strategic decisions would be informed by those. I would ask that we, in your work as the principal planner on this, like to try to look outside of the Bay Area examples and try to find lessons. I think that there are good lessons and ways that we in the Bay Area can learn to improve our strategic planning for large capital projects. So I would just, I'll leave it at that comment. And then the second case is, the second topic is related. For Crossrail, right, which became Elizabeth Line, the business case for it was very important, not just in its shaping what the right project was. For folks who don't know, there was a initial strategic plan done for Crossrail, which is a project that connects rail, like heavy-duty rail service through London. The initial proposal for that came in the 1990s. That failed, did not win significant political or public approval. The team that had been working on it went back and did a business case, which essentially made an argument for why it would be a net positive investment. And that business case really helped sell the project. Have we looked at that kind of methodology to our planning?
Yeah, I think.
Andy, I'm so sorry. Could you please?
Hello. Okay. Yes, I think that is something you will see a little bit more of in the actual final report. So we did work with a team of technical consultants as part of our team, mostly has been staff here and at SFMTA, who have a lot of experience in Canada and other international locations in developing projects through a business case framework. We have our traditional environmental framework that we run things through here, which is focused on, finding decisions and avoiding environmental impacts and all the other factors that go along with that. But we have been thinking about how we can build in that business case framework as well to help us think about how we monetize the benefits. In particular, has been the challenge in this phase in a relatively small study. We didn't have resources to truly think on a project of this scale, how can we truly measure that? But it is something we want to keep an eye on. So definitely under consideration.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Member Milford Rosales.
Thank you very much. I want to echo Member Barnes' comments about being just excited about this long-term planning and foresight here. Just out of curiosity, when we're talking about competing for federal funding, are those requests we're going to be making before the end of 2028?
Oh,
nice. Thanks.
Thanks so much for the presentation and for answering a bunch of my questions on Monday. I have just one more question, which is the survey feedback that you mentioned. I think those concerns you heard from the public really resonated with me and are consistent with what I also hear when I talk to folks about this project or the Central Subway and, cost. Can it happen faster? Disruptions, preventing displacement. So I was wondering, should we expect the final study to specifically make recommendations on mitigating those concerns and or at least position those concerns as trade-offs that should take priority during the once actual planning is underway?
I think closer to the latter. So the study will not make specific recommendations about how to solve or potentially even address those. It does seek to capture them as concerns and be transparent about where decisions about that will take place in that work planning process that I described. I think we'll certainly highlight them as the things that were top of mind in our outreach. But it's going to be important for us, I think, to weigh as we learn more and refine the project that some of those things, to be honest, are in tension, of course, right? Like cheaper and faster may compete with less disruptive, for example. So understanding where priorities lie within that list is going to be an important part of our ongoing engagement with the community and with decisions.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate that. If there are no other questions or comments from members, is there any public comment in the room on this item? Yeah.
historically, the Erie corridor in the 1930s with engineer O'Shaughnessy, they were going to build rail on O'Farrell Street to mitigate the north-south connection at 3rd and Kearney that was planned. 1935, it was rejected by the citizens because of the Depression. 1960, BART was going to go to Marin, and it was going to go out Geary and Park Presidio. That failed when Marin pulled out. 1995, the new BART subsurface with light rail. And I sat in this room for years listening to how that was going to happen, and it never did. 2021, we have Connect SF, and we've got the program now. Doesn't mention the fact that there's a declining birth rate that's been ongoing for 20 years, and I just don't believe that San Francisco is going to grow by 29%. And also, we're not considering the convenience of the autonomous vehicles with Waymo, Zook, and Tesla, and Uber, and Lyft that are entering the market. And we're counting on transit to provide that 5-minute service to go and be the basis of this with SF Connect. So I think I don't have much hope in this ever materializing, and I think it's going to go the way of all the other projects that have been ongoing in the history of Geary Boulevard. So, that's my public comment on it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
There is no remote public comment for item 8.
Great. Public comment is closed. Thank you again so much for the presentation and for sticking with us. All right. That was an information item, so we'll move on to item 9, introduction of new business. Do any CAC members have any new business? Not seeing any. Okay. Then, oh, yep, absolutely. Member Bars.
Okay, thank you. I knew it. I had talked about this with some other District 7 residents. We were hoping to get a presentation from BART about all of the service decisions and the measures that are being taken to address it. I know that's not a direct purview, but as the TA is a funder of BART, I was hoping that maybe we could reach out to them.
Great. Is there any other new business? Not seeing any. Is there any public comment in the room on new business? Not seeing any. Is there any remote public comment on new business?
There's no remote public comment on new business.
Great. We'll move on to public comment. This is general public comment on items under the Transportation Authority CAC's purview that are not otherwise agendized at this meeting. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment?
Yes, thank you very much. Edward Mason again. My only comment is that I have observed bunching of muni buses on routes as opposed to being spaced out. And I can't attribute it to anything, but I did hear that there was a report of increased congestion within San Francisco. That was by, I think, MTC. So I don't know if there's a correlation between that and my observations of whether it's the 48 line or Mission Street, whatever, of buses bunched. And I don't know what to account for it, but just a general public comment regarding what we're facing with here in the city. Thank you. Also, Oh, can you hear? Okay. And also, one observation I'm having now is we had slow streets on Sanchez. My observation, and especially yesterday, I was on an outbound J that was mired down on inbound J between 26th and 28th Street. That's 2 blocks. And it was stuck in all the automobile traffic on Church Street going north. And I was just amazed at that. And I've also observed that in the afternoon to some degree on a limited basis. So I don't know if that's the unintended consequence of slow Sanchez Street that's now becoming slow Church Street, but the negative aspect is that it's now impacting the J line. And that also is periodically bunched. So whatever it is, I guess it's living in the city. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Operator, is there any remote public comment?
There is no remote public comment for this item.
Great. Public comment is closed. Vice Chair Daniels?
Thank you, Chair Siegel. I just wanted to make a comment and an acknowledgement that this is February and we are in Black History Month, and I want to honor Garrett Augustus Morgan, 1877 to 1963, who we can thank for the three-way stoplight. In 1922, the traffic signal was created in Cleveland.
Thank you, Vice Chair Daniels. And on that note, we will adjourn. Thank you so much, everyone. This meeting is now adjourned. See you in March.